Andrew Levy is a Labour analyst, been watching our Labour dynamics for many years. Andrew, good afternoon to you. Nahawu are very angry. Obviously, the agreement is binding on them, but it's a sign of how bitter these negotiations got.
It certainly is, Stephen, but I think the points, or some of the points that you make really bear repeating, and that is that the public sector employees are immensely well off compared to the private sector. Firstly, the average wage is around 40,000 Rand a month. Secondly, the job security is far, far greater. The benefits are far, far greater. So these are workers who are certainly not at the bottom of the barrel. They're well off. Now, having said that, one understands that everyone wants a better standard of living and everyone wants more money. But to parade the 1.5% increase as being no increase at all is absolute nonsense. It makes no sense. Those salaries were increased, and they have been increased again by that amount. There is the gratuity, which is somewhat puzzling because it's got to be financed. And although government have said it's got to be financed from current expenditure, in other words, they've got to take the money from somewhere, presumably someone will pay for it along the line. But those increases themselves are very, very significant. It's on a sliding scale, and at the bottom, the amount is about 11%. Now, that is about twice, if not nearly 3 times, the current level of settlement, and it's very, very good. Now, granted, it goes to the lowest paid, but that's a good thing, because we're trying to close the wage gap. And no one can seriously argue that we should not favour the lower paid and move away from these across-the-board percentage increases. Now, if you look at the way the increase diminishes in percentage terms as it goes up the scale, at the upper end of the scale, it's about 3%. So if you add the 3% to the 1.5%, that's about 4.5%, which beats inflation, which is lower than that at the moment, but is in line with the levels of settlement in the economy. And bearing in mind that the level of settlements in the economy are going around fewer workers because more and more workers find themselves without a job. So all in all, it may well be that Nahawu have got to put up a fight and have got to be seen to be mouthing all the language. And indeed, I have no doubt that they're very angry about it. But in reality, there is very little they can do about it. I discount the possibility of a strike amongst Nahawu's members. I think there are legal issues there which need to be explored. I'm not quite sure Nahawu is saying they will attack it in court. Again, I'm not quite sure what the basis of their action would be there. But my expectation is it will probably peter out in a flood of litigation that goes nowhere. And before we look around, we'll be into next year again.
This gratuity is very interesting, and as far as I know, and I think you've suggested before on this platform, that in fact this hasn't really happened before. It's quite substantial, over 1,000 Rand. As it's been explained to me, this is every month for the next year, and then if there's no agreement next year, it continues to be paid.
Yeah. You know, Stephen, I find this immensely puzzling and rather worrying. Firstly, I think it was an extremely ill-considered move. It's going to come back and plague people for a long, long time. Secondly, the idea of a sort of cash gratuity, I don't know how they're going to pay it. It's certainly got to be taxed. But it's not a gratuity. You earn your salary, you get paid what the job is worth or what you agree to, and suddenly here's this way of trying to pay people under the table. And it's not clear where the money's coming from. And, you know, the thing that strikes me as being vitally important in the public sector is the fact that it is, and this was a point that the court made, it is against the law, against the statutes, for the government to borrow money to pay current salaries or to divert money that should be going elsewhere into salaries. So now that the courts are alert to that, I don't think we're out of the woods yet. We're going to see much more of that one. And of course, the chances are that it will be demanded elsewhere. And indeed, there are already some employers who are paying once-off back-to-work payments at the end of the negotiations as a means of sweetening the deal. Well, it may well get the the deal across the line. And obviously it doesn't go onto the base salary, so it's compounded every year. But generally speaking, it's not a good idea.
Is there a perverse incentive to not agree to a wage increase next year, or to drag out the negotiations because the gratuity would still be paid?
Most certainly there is. And another reason for this is the fact that these agreements are almost automatically backdated. So it really doesn't make too much difference in terms of when the thing gets signed. You're going to get the money anyway. And that's another mistake that most managements have made in South Africa since they started this collective bargaining, is this automatic concession of backdating. But yes, it is. And of course, if they get the outcome they hope for in the Constitutional Court about last year's increment, they're going to want that backdated and then compounded and going forward. And the whole thing is completely unaffordable.
Andrew Levy, Labour analyst, I do appreciate the time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Stephen.
Well, significant developments, of course, coming out of that negotiation, that signing ceremony. You saw that earlier today here on Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405.